Your state champion in extemporaneous speaking, Ajay Gupta.
Look at you, listening to Spotify while
in 2007, right before the Munich Security Conference, then President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, told his foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, over and over and over again, "Mi Ruski," translating directly into English as "we are Russian." And he's right. He's Russian to invade Ukraine, Russian straight into the arms of China, and Russian to hack the United States. Because most recently, the Ukraine issue has been at the top of concerns for world leaders. As an article from the Stratford Global Intelligence explains, on February 3rd of this year, that as Russia amasses 130,000 troops on the Ukrainian border, what seems to be a potential invasion of the country.
Do whatever it is you're doing. That's exactly why it makes sense to promote your business here. Yeah, your business. Whether you have 2 employees or 2,000, your voice can reach as broad or as narrow of an audience as you need. And
our very own Vice President Kamala Harris has been slotted to attend the conference as U.S. engagement increases. And so considering that a potential Russian invasion
with them
of
where
Ukraine
visual media can't.
the lives of
Try it today at adstudio.spotify.com or tap the banner to learn more.
That we ask today's question. To what extent
what
will
a
U.S.
vibe.
engagement in the Munich
I
Security
love how the
Conference in
4
Germany
members all
impact
sound so
Russian
different.
invasion?
I'm Kathleen Scher.
And I'm Allison Toy. On our
The
show,
answer
Lion Share,
is
we get to
actually
feature full
very
songs
little.
alongside their
Because it's
stories when we
not
highlight
enough to
Asian
change
artists every
Russia's
week in our
position
Music Plus
on
Talk Show, a
invasion.
new type of show
More
created with
specifically,
Spotify's free
because
podcasting
first,
platform, Anchor.
With
They
Anchor, you
simply
can add
do
any
not have the
Spotify song
diplomatic
into your
capacity
episodes and
to
combine them with
execute
talk
power.
segments by you to create a
Second,
Music Plus
because
talk show.
US
Want to make your own?
involvement
It's
in
easy.
the
All you have to do is head to
conference won't change power
anchor.fm/Music
dynamics.
Plus Talk and download the
And
Anchor app.
finally, and perhaps most importantly, because Vladimir Putin's already made up his mind. You see, one of the reasons as to why U.S. engagement will only start Stalin efforts in the short term is because there's no real executive body backing the Munich Security Conference in the first place. In fact, as the Der Spiegel, a German newspaper, explains on January 25th of this year, that historically, the Munich Conference has only been treated as a diplomatic talk. It doesn't have contractual obligations or the ability to, say, freeze assets or implement sanctions on any country or person, meaning it doesn't have the bite to its bark to actually force the Russian regime into compliance. And in doing so, Stephen Pfeiffer, a Russian analyst at the Brookings Institute, explains on February 11th of this year that what the Munich Security Conference can actually do is vague. Vague is the kind of word you put into Wordle on your first guess. It's not something you want describing the executive powers of the Munich Conference. And because there are very little executive authorities that the Munich Conference can actually push through, these Western powers aren't going to have enough leverage over the Russian regime to truly force them to side with our concessions. Meaning U.S. engagement, no matter how large in the Munich Security Conference, simply isn't enough to truly impact Russian impacts in invasion over Ukraine in the short term. It's true that the U.S. came rushing in to help fix the situation because they recognize the importance of U.S. involvement in international affairs. But unfortunately, U.S. engagement in the talks isn't going to change the crucial power dynamics at play in order to make any true, tangible change. As an article from The Economist put it on February 14th, which is Valentine's Day, that would go better in extemporum because Valentine's Day is a joke for extempers, but But as that article explains, the United States has already entrenched itself as being anti-Russia, meaning U.S. engagement in this talk doesn't change the facet of Western powers. You see, as that same article continues on, if we had countries like Turkey, who are more in between Russia's sphere of influence and the Western European powers, that might have some influence. But U.S. engagement doesn't have direct influence, especially considering the other side of the coin as well. As a different article from Germany, this time at the Deutsche Welle, explains on January 27th of this year, that the CSTO, or the Collective Security Treaty Organization, is a group of former Soviet states in which Russia controls collective security for. And these nations are handedly in the side of Russia, meaning that as the United States is entrenched in its ideology, and as Eastern European powers simply aren't going to change their position either, US involvement isn't going to change the true power dynamics at the conference, demonstrating that US engagement isn't actually going to change the threat of Russian invasion in the long term. Now, what we saw literally in the past week is that President Biden said that Putin has made the decision to invade Ukraine. Unfortunately, he hasn't made the decision to stop posting shirtless pictures of himself. Like Vlad, we don't need to see it again. But for Putin, he's already made up his mind and made his decision, meaning no US engagement can actually change that in the first place. As an article from The Hill explains on January 28th of this year, that Putin's grand strategy since he was president is that he's always wanted to rebuild the Soviet Union. In fact, one time in the 1990s, he called the dissolution of the Soviet Union the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. Right. Because of all the geopolitical catastrophes in the 1900s, the dissolution of the Soviet Union was one of them, right above World War II, I'm sure. And unfortunately, that means that US engagement isn't actually going to change Putin's mind because he's already made it up in the first place. As the Washington Post continues on January 29th of this year, that in rebuilding the Soviet Union, Vladimir Putin needs to overtake Ukraine in order to prevent further Eastern European integration into NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, demonstrating that because Vladimir Putin has this impetus to invade Ukraine for his own geopolitical gains, the US involvement in the Munich Security Conference isn't going to change that. In fact, Vladimir Putin is still going to be steadfast in his ambitions. And so considering that the lives of 40 million Ukrainians could literally change overnight, we had to ask today's question. To what extent will US engagement of the Munich Security Conference impact Russian invasion over Ukraine? And we saw that the answer was very little impact, because it won't change the position of Russia. More specifically, because first, the Munich conference lacks executive authority. Second, because US involvement won't change the power dynamics at play. And finally, because Vladimir Putin's already made up his mind. So even though Putin that day in 2007 was Russian to do a lot of bad things, it seems like, unfortunately, he's not going to be Stalin in getting them done.